Joining us now, former Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson, who served in the Obama administration. He's also a current trustee of the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. It is an amazing museum, by the way, so moving and so worth going to see if you're visiting New York, but also worth going to revisit every once in a while if you live in New York. And I think what's so striking about today is not only that we're remembering 9/11 and that it's been 24 years and, you know, all the progress we've made, but also it's a good reminder that in the wake of violent, terrible acts, that we do have the ability to come together and to see past our differences and to see past our anger and to be one nation, one community.
Katie, I hope that is true. When I go to these observances every year, I think about two things. One, because it's been 24 years, I see at the observance people who are today's first responders, today's elected leaders, and then you see those who were first responded and elected leaders 24 years ago becoming increasingly gray. Governor George Pataki, Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who were both there this morning. The other thought I always have, and I've had for the last several years now, is whether we could, in fact, respond to another crisis like we did to 9/11. The nation came together. We mobilized for the so-called war against terror. We went to war in Afghanistan. We went to war in Iraq. I used to say it'd take a crisis to bring us together. I don't know whether that's true. If we had another 9/11 today, I fear that there would be, because so much of the American public is prone to extremist views and is drowning in conspiracy theories, there'd be arguments about who did it, who's responsible, is it some type of cover-up, how should we respond? And I worry that how to respond, how to mobilize would quickly fall along partisan lines. I hope that's not true.
Is that just what you see online? Is it just, does it feel so big and so loud because that's what we see on our phones and what we see in our social media? I don't know if it's true for us in person with each other.
Well, that's a good question. But, you know, I used to say it would take a crisis to bring us together. We had a crisis 5 years ago called COVID. And we fell into partisan political debates about masks, about vaccines, and more Americans died than was really necessary because of our response, our partisan response to COVID. And so I'd like to believe that our nation still has the ability to come together as we did 24 years ago in the aftermath of the attack. But I worry that the mood of the American electorate, the mood of the American public is such that we may not be able to.
That's really depressing. Let me
Sorry
ask
about
you,
that.
Yeah,
Yes.
let me ask you about this report that you've co-authored. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yes, and thanks for your interest. 2 years ago, the president of the American Bar Association appointed me and former Judge Michael Luttig to lead a task force on how do we restore and strengthen our American democracy. We put together an extraordinary group of Americans, bipartisan, former judges, retired Navy admirals, historians, not just lawyers. And we generated a report that was released yesterday. Rather than try to respond to every crisis, every outrage of the day or the week, we asked ourselves, what is it about the undercurrents of American society that lead the American public, the American voters, to make the choices they've made in the last several elections? And so we make a series of recommendations, including rededicating ourselves to American civics education. And when it comes to extremist views and the like, we've endorsed several pieces of federal legislation to clearly identify AI content, to disallow deep fakes intended to mislead the public. And we talk about the rising tide of political violence in America, as evidenced by the assassination of Charlie Kirk just yesterday, and where the current state of our democracy is leading the public. One of our other major recommendations is open nonpartisan primaries so that our elected leaders are not just appealing to the extreme right and the extreme left because they fear primaries. Let's encourage our elected leaders to address the needs and desires of those more in the center.
Listen, I think that's a great idea, and I think I would say that as well. I think there are a few ways to make it better. One is open primaries. One is to formalize redistricting in a way that is, more like a graph as opposed to a
citizen redistricting commissions. It's another one of our recommendations. Right now, you have a situation where the politicians pick their voters.
But we are only having more gerrymandering, and we are having fewer open primaries. It's going in the opposite direction. So you have the recommendations. How do you get people to see beyond their own political interests and adopt those recommendations?
Well, in this respect, I am an optimist.
Okay, great.
And when it comes to citizen redistricting commissions, if you put it to the people on a ballot initiative, do you support having apolitical, ordinary, everyday citizens draw legislative districts as opposed to the politicians? You get a resounding yes, unless the political forces in a state are able to beat back the initiative. But when you poll on this issue, you find that something like 70 or 80% of the public are supportive of.
How do you get that ballot initiative on the ballot?
That's a good point, because sometimes it's up to politicians to make that happen. But that is the path forward. That is the specific path forward to, I believe, more accountable government, more accountable elected leaders. It's something of a vicious cycle where the public is more and more prone to conspiracy theories, extremist views, and we have elected leaders who pander to those views. And if we can re-incentivize our elected leaders to be more accountable to the political center, then compromise is no longer a dirty word.
Yeah.
And people are elected to get stuff done.
Let's talk a little bit about Charlie Kirk and what happened yesterday, the horror of what happened yesterday. The FBI is still searching for the suspect.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about what it's like inside counterterrorism units within the United States with a rise in domestic terror.
My guess is that, and this is an educated guess, I don't know this, that they know the name of the person in the photograph, and it's probably hours before he is captured, arrested. When your image is splashed across every newspaper in the country, it's a matter of.
They're saying this is a person of interest, not necessarily a suspect quite yet.
Correct, but the individual in the photographs, I suspect they know his name, and they will find him soon. Domestic terrorism is something that doesn't discriminate in terms of ideology. We don't know the exact motive of the assassin. I suspect we'll find out soon. But in the mind of a deranged individual, it's often hard to pigeonhole or characterize the motive. We're going to learn a lot more about this subject. But the point is, and we make this point in our report, political assassinations, political violence is not limited to any particular part of the political spectrum. And what I worry about is where we may be in a mode where we're seeing this in bunches, in spades. I'm 68 years old today, and so I remember the 1960s. We lost 5 leaders in 5 years: John F. Kennedy, James Meredith, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Robert Kennedy. It was like, for me growing up at that period, it was a regular event. And I fear that we may be back in such a period again today.
Yeah, that is certainly the concern. Comparing it especially to the 60s, I think, is very apt. Again, we have had a news conference that was scheduled for 2:30. It got pushed back to 2:45 from law enforcement out there in Utah, and now it's been pushed back without a definitive time because, as officials say, rapid developments in the investigation.
As we speak, I suspect.
Well, translate that for me, rapid developments.
Again, I'd be speculating. It may be that they've identified the individual. We just don't know. I think we'll find out soon, very soon.